Hi everyone, this is Mrs. Ortega here, and we are going to cover our last chapter, chapter 14. In this video today, I am well aware our exam is sneaking up on us, and so that is why this video today on chapter 14, we will go simply through what will be on the exam. And so that will hopefully narrow some time down for you and give you more time to study. As we go through, I will also let you know there are some things I'm going to edit on the review to hopefully help you take some of this stuff out. And so here we are in chapter 14 that covers the biosphere. So this is the ecological study of the earth essentially. And so we're going to take a look first at the slide down here. And define ecology. Ecology is the scientific study of the interactions of organisms and the environment. And so this aspect of science focuses on how those organisms change the environment, how they affect the environment, and in turn how that environment affects the organism. And so there are different types of factors that are involved. These factors are either living, which is biotic, or not living, which is abiotic. So remember, A means without, so without biotic meaning life here. Abiotic factors are going to be anything that's not living. So these are things like water, oxygen, carbon dioxide, the sun, precipitation, all those things are not living, and so that will be abiotic factors. Whereas biotic factors are all living organisms, and so that is a key difference here when looking at ecology and looking at the two major factors involved. And so as we go through, I'm keeping the PowerPoint presentation part up so I can make notes as we go through here. We'll just do a nice bright blue here. So ecology is one, biotic is another, abiotic is another thing to focus on. All right, so looking at ecology can study at different levels, just like the different levels of biological life. You have different levels of ecology. And first, starting out is the organism. So that is studying the organism and how it interacts with the environment. Then moving upward or getting larger would be population, which would be a group of individuals of the same species living in a particular geographical area. Notice it is just about the same definition as population definition itself that we saw in earlier chapters. But now when you're applying it to ecology, you're looking to see how this population interacts with the environment. Then community would be a group of populations of living organisms living close enough together for interaction. And then ecosystem will bring the community plus the non-living factors, the abiotic components together. And so I think I have a little picture of that down here. So here's the organism, all right, one fish in this case interacting with the environment, population, two fish. Then looking at community will be this population of fish with this other population of fish in the same area. And then ecosystem is going to bring the non-living factors. So in this case, the water level, salinity, the amount of salt in the water, amount of carbon dioxide and oxygen in the water, sunlight entering the water, all of those things are abiotic factors in this ecosystem. Okay, so I'm going to multitask here and look at our review, make sure I cover things as we look through this chapter. So ecology, abiotic, biotic components, distinguish between different levels, check. Okay. And then in terms of levels, it does go bigger. So with multiple ecosystems, you can form landscapes. So if you imagine in this next image, you have mountains and then you have grasslands. So those are two different ecosystems right next to each other. So that would make a landscape. And then biosphere, which is the whole entire Earth. And so that completes the different levels, but we'll focus on here these four: organismal, population, community, and ecosystem. Alrighty, so moving right along. Ecology and the study of the ecosystem were not always this way. Back in the 1950s, the view in terms of scientific study of the ecosystem and life was much different. The prevailing view was that the environment itself was a force to be tamed and to be controlled for human purposes or reasons. Just like the way the livestock had been domesticated, and before this time, how colonization happened, moving westward, pioneers settled and domesticated the life already there in existence, and reinvented things or changed things for human purposes. And so that was the continuing view, that nature was a force to be tamed and needed to have human dominance. And so that's very different from the viewpoints that we have now. There are many different viewpoints. And so keeping that in mind, let's take a look at how they changed nature. And in this aspect, we'll look at pesticides. So chemical pesticides were embraced enthusiastically. They wanted to get rid of those nuisance insects and other small animals that were a bother to most humans. And so the most widely used chemical pesticide at this time was a molecule called DDT. It's abbreviated, a really long name, but for us you can just understand DDT was a chemical pesticide that was sprayed pretty much everywhere in the 1940s and 1950s. And so you can see that in this image on Jones Beach, New York in 1945 was being sprayed with humans walking around on the beach already, which is obviously we know is not a good thing. When you spray pesticides, you should not interact with that. You should leave it to settle on the ground for a while. And so obviously they didn't know that back then. And so what we discovered over the use of these pesticides, that some of them started showing up in places such as food. They started showing up in soil. They started affecting different animal populations like birds of prey, large birds, such as the one in this picture below, the falcon here. Populations were declining drastically. Birds of prey were being hard to be found, and so this caused alert for many scientists. And so as they studied DDT, they found that it remained in the soil or water or wherever it was sprayed for a long period of time after it was applied. And so it was especially concerning that this molecule was staying and was not going away. And so that may produce problems for farmers that use that DDT. Now it's in the food. What are we going to do? And so to try to get this information out to everyone, as you know, at the time we did not have internet, a former marine biologist, Rachel Carson, wrote a book called The Silent Spring in 1962 that caused widespread attention to the pesticide issue. And so awareness of the problem started developing into concern, and then trying to address the environmental issues. And so that is Rachel Carson there in this slide. And so this did bring about change, and the use of the pesticide DDT was inherently slowed down, and other things were affected as well. But for us, we want to focus on how that DDT is being used and what scientists did. In this case, for us, Rachel Carson was a scientist that wrote Silent Spring to bring about concern for the issue. So, all right, and so that should be here. So understand the previous view of the environment. Nature was a force to be tamed. Result of DDT was staying in the soil and everything, everywhere for long periods of time. Reduced populations of birds of prey, and the book Silent Spring called attention to this. So all that was here. So now let's look at some abiotic factors. These factors include energy sources, so sunlight coming from the sun, UV radiation, all of that electromagnetic radiation, all those energy waves coming from the sun will be abiotic. Temperature is abiotic, so warm or cold temperatures in the environments. Presence of water, along with inorganic nutrients like oxygen, will be an abiotic factor. Most people do consider carbon dioxide in this group as well, even though it is organic. And then there are other aquatic and terrestrial factors like soil, rocks, non-living matter that are also abiotic factors. Let's see here. And so all these factors do influence life in the biosphere, and so that's what's shown on these pictures below. The snowy owl and giant tube worms in those two pictures, they have a lot of adaptations into their bodies to survive in these unique environmental conditions. Let's see, and so this section here, 14.4, you can go ahead, go ahead and skip. Don't even worry about it. Same here. Righty. Moving right on to the next section, and that we'll look at terrestrial communities and aquatic communities and how these variations contribute to different life on Earth. And so looking at these, you have to actually look at the overall principles of the Earth. So there are lots of different variations of climate due to uneven heating of the Earth's surface, the Earth's tilt of axis as it rotates around the sun, along with different precipitation and wind patterns. So let's take a look at these, and I'll point out what to know. All right, so the first principle is that the sunlight coming from the sun hits Earth differently at different angles. And so these angles vary what we call latitudinally, which is down here, latitude. Make sure this is latitude. It won't let me highlight here. So that's going to be going from, if you're using a compass, north and south, right? And so here, looking at the Earth and how the sun hits, it's going to strike most directly in the center, on the equator. As the sun, light is coming from the sun, it's going straight horizontally, it's going to hit most at the equator. It means for this region, the sunlight is going to be most intense here. Technical difficulties. right, I'll try that again later. So as it hits most intensely at the equator, that's going to produce warmer temperatures in that region. And we'll see that in another picture. Moving upward, like more north and more south, these tropical regions, Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn, they are getting a good amount of sun, but not as direct as the equator. And so as you move away from the equator, the amount of sun hitting that region is going to be less per area. And so the low level of incoming sunlight near the South Pole and the North Pole is going to equate to less sun in that region and cooler temperatures. And so understanding where the sun hits most directly is the equator. That results in warmer temperatures. And so understanding that, and that is the latitudinal variation, right? So that's moving up and down or north and south, whereas longitudinal is like east to west. That's that part determines like our time zone regions, right? And so most people are familiar with longitude because it's the time zone regions, but latitude is up and down from the poles and the equator. All right. Moving on to the next principle here, and that is the Earth's sphere is on an axis, it's on a tilt, and it's not perfect. There's a constant tilt that the Earth has when rotating around the sun. And so that causes our seasons. So looking here at, let's start with June. In the June time of the year, this June solstice, the Earth is tilted towards the sun. And so that causes longer days, warmer temperatures, right? It's slightly closer to the sun. There's a constant tilt of 23.5 degrees, which is a good amount to cause a large change here. So at June, Earth is tilted towards the sun. At September, it's tilted to the side. And so it's not going to be either towards or away. It's going to be to the right side of this rotation. And so moving along here to December, the Earth is going to be tilted away from the sun, and it's going to produce colder weather, shorter days. And then finally, March is going to tilt towards the left, so it's not going to be towards or away. And so for this, I want you to remember which season does the Earth tilt where. So June, it tilts it towards the sun. December, it tilts away. For March and September, they tilt to the side. So it doesn't matter knowing which side, it tilts to the side. It's not going to have a tilt that affects necessarily how much sun hits it. Alrighty. So looking here, the next principle we're going to look at is air and precipitation. So towards the equator, right, the 0 degrees here, that is going to be where the sunlight hits most intensely, right? So it's going to cause warm temperatures. These warm temperatures are going to then have an impact on the weather conditions. And so here, looking at this area, that warm temperature is going to have moist air that wants to ascend as heat moves into the environment and wants to rise. And so it's rising, and it's moist air, and so that's going to release that as precipitation, as rainfall. And so as that process happens, then the air is going to move upwards, from here to here. And so that air is now going to be dry because it just let out all the water vapor as water precipitation. And so now as that is going to rotate, is going to be dry air, and now it's going to descend back onto the earth, and that will want to absorb moisture. And so it's going to take moisture from the environment, which results in a desert or dry region. And so that's how you have these tropical regions at the equator that are very heavy in rainfall, very moist regions, and then they are surrounded by dry regions, and that's because of these what we call trade winds. And so in these trade winds, the ascending air is going to be moist, is going to release that moisture as rainfall, and then the descending air is going to be dry and wants to absorb moisture as it lost all this water vapor. And so that's what I want you to remember what ascending moist air does. Ascending air will cause rainfall. Descending air will try to absorb moisture and creates dry environments. All right, this one here, it is on a review. Please go ahead and just take that off. So look down here. We did figures A and B. We'll do F in just a minute, but take off D here. We just did A, B, and C. So keep C, but take off D. Just as you can see, as the Earth rotates in a day's time, it does create more wind patterns. Those wind patterns are important, but it's not something I'm going to test you on. So go ahead and skip over this image then. All right, moving right along to another global pattern, and that is ocean currents. Ocean currents are well-known, well-established currents that flow of water movement through the oceans. And so here, we will focus on their temperatures and their location toward with the equator. So as ocean currents flow towards the equator, they're coming from different poles, and so these are cold. That has cold water, and so as they go towards the equator regions, we know this has the most direct sunlight. That's going to cause it to warm up, and so as they flow away from the equator, now they are warm. And that's the general principle you want to know. When it flows towards the equator, it's cold ocean current. And when it's flowing away from the equator, it's warm. All right, this one here, go ahead and take off as well. It is another general principle, but we have quite enough. All right, so this just shows you how the oceans interact with land, and that there's going to be a cool breeze flowing over that will cause it ascending moist air to release precipitation, once but twice, and then as it goes over the mountains, descending dry air is going to try to absorb moisture, all of that good stuff. But this general principle won't make you know for the exam. All right, so moving right along, our next topic will be biomes. Biomes are defined as major types of ecological associations that occupy broad geographical regions of land or water. So biomes are defined first by, are they terrestrial, are they on land, or are they aquatic, are they in water? Okay, so first, aquatic biomes. There are many defined regions of aquatic biomes, so we'll focus on two regions here, and they're related. That is the aphotic zone and the photic zone. And so these are regions of any aquatic biome. So this can be applied to oceans, this can be applied to lakes, ponds, streams, anything pretty much any aquatic biome can have these zones. And so that is what we'll look at here in this next image. That the photic zone, given its name, photic meaning photon or light particle, this is the region with light sufficient for photosynthesis. So in the photic zone, you will have organisms that will be able to undergo photosynthesis, meaning green algae, cyanobacteria, photosynthetic bacteria, plants. All that will be found in the photic zone of your aquatic biome. Whereas the aphotic zone is going to be without light. So not enough light for photosynthesis. And so they do have some light going through as it gets further, deeper into the ocean. In this case, there will be regions with no light. And so that has unique adapted organisms living in that environment to survive without light, but you won't find plants there. All right, so looking at aquatic biomes, no aphotic zone and photic zone here. This does not want to work for me today. I'm sorry, we'll try this again. Trying to find ways to help get through these slides better for you guys. Looking at further pictures, you can see lots of different examples. And then other examples here. The lovely anglerfish many of you recognize from Finding Nemo is in that bottom aphotic region known here. I think it's even past the twilight zone there. But yep. So next thing we'll look at are the three environments where land and water meet. So these are unique regions that we'll want to know. And they're listed here. The first one being intertidal zones. These are regions where the ocean meets the coast. And so during different times of the day, they're going to either have what we call high tide or low tide. So high tide's where the water level has risen, and low tide is where that water level has receded. And so there's a low tide in the mornings, usually on coast regions like beaches. And so at nighttime, they have a high tide. And so that water comes up. And so that zone where the tide goes either high or low, there are things living in those zones. And so that would be intertidal zone. Looking at estuaries would be the next thing. Estuaries are where freshwater meets ocean water or marine water. And so this region has unique salinity factors and unique organisms living adapted to either or freshwater or ocean water or both. And looking lastly, wetlands are transitional areas between aquatic and terrestrial ecosystems. Essentially, these are areas of life that are adapted well for to be what we call inundated or surrounded by water most, if not all of the time. So the swampy regions of the southern belt, like swamplands, are example of wetlands. So here is an estuary in Georgia. So that's where these inter-network of rivers going to meet the ocean there. I'll go and skip that. And so the next point, I believe, on the review, let's go ahead and take a check here. There are the three types. So for the ocean zones, that will be just a photic versus aphotic region. Alright, and so looking at 3 types, we just did that, and then we're right here, right along this area. So looking here, freshwater biomes, they fall into 2 broad categories, standing water and flowing water. So standing water will be water that does not have a current. These are lakes and ponds, whereas flowing water has a current running through it. So this would be rivers and streams. They have a direction of water flow. And so this is a nice, simpler one to study from. Photic has light is sufficient for photosynthesis. Aphotic does not. There's also something called the benthic realm, and that, or benthic zone, that's along the floor of the lake or pond or ocean, but we won't need to know that. Right, here's an example of a stream. You can see a nice flow of water going, and most of these regions that do not have deep water will be all photic regions. Most of them will be just photic. The aphotic regions are reserved for those deeper lakes and oceans. All right, this is a marsh in Ohio. So this is a nice example of a swamp-like region where some things are going to be inundated or surrounded by water most, if not all of the time. So I would consider this to maybe be a wetland region. Alrighty. Moving on to terrestrial biomes. Looking at terrestrial biomes, we'll see 9 major types, and they're distinguished primarily by their predominant vegetation or their life on the biome. It's good to know that these biomes can be found in multiple areas of the earth, so they might not be in just one region, but they can be. And so that's what you see here are the 9 biomes just on the right, along with where they're found on the continents. And so we'll go through each of these, and you'll want to know just a little bit about each of them. All right, so starting with tropical forests. They are going to have variable rainfall, and we'll most note them for the tropical rainforests to be exact, that they have enormous number of species living in this region and this is both plant and animal species. Plants have a lot of what we call vertical layering. So vertical, like up and down layering of trees, or shrubs, how high they go, and so that they compete for the sunlight in those regions is highly competitive. And so here you can see an image of tropical rainforests, and you can see some vertical layering, different levels of trees and shrubs. So you can think tropical rainforests, lots of animal and plant species, a high precipitation, and they're found, around the equator. But we'll stick with a lot of precipitation, a lot of rainwater, and a highly competitive region for life, so plant and animal species. All right, moving right along to savannas. They are known for being warm year-round, have dramatic seasonal variation, have grasses and scattered trees. And so this is here. So this is well known for being in Africa with the zebras, the giraffes, the lions, all of antelopes, all of those animals running along those grassy areas. That would be the savanna. Savannas have nice grass regions with scattered trees throughout. They are susceptible to high amounts of fire as they have a high temperature range year-round. And so the fire does destroy a lot of life, but thanks to the roots of the grass and some trees, they can recover quickly. Some trees, however, do not. Alrighty. Savanna, you can think grassland with some trees. I can also think your great example of this would be Lion King. Alright, deserts. They are known for being dry, not necessarily for their temperature, which is usually hot, but sometimes it can be, you can have a cold desert. And so they are known for not having rainfall. And so there are some examples here. So there is a nice dry desert, so little to no rainfall yearly. And this example has a high temperature range, so it's a hot desert. But there are cool or cold deserts. One example is the Namib Desert, which is written in my comments there, Namib Desert. It's cold on their coast, which is on Africa, the coast of Africa, where they range from 48 to 68 degrees daily. And then in the inland of this desert, it can get as warm as 113 degrees during the summer. So that can be a warm desert, but it can also be a cold desert. So it fits into that category of being cold as well. All right, so the deserts are dry. Moving on, the chaparral is a unique one here in that it is characterized by these dense spiny shrubs or small bushes with tough green leaves. They are going to have mild rainy winters, hot dry summers, but they are adapted to periodic fires, which is this unique characteristic. And taking a look here, you can see it is found in very few regions, most notably for us since it's on our continent and on the coast of California. These shrub-like regions are going to be well adapted to fires, as it is a dry region, low precipitation. These evergreen shrubs will occasionally get on fire, and their evergreen leaves and all that will burn, but their roots below ground will remain, and so that will allow for them to grow back easily. And so they're adapted to these fires. Unfortunately, not everyone on the coast of California will be adapted to these fires, but the shrub-like region is a chaparral, and that's what you want to know. It's spiny green shrubs. They're adapted well to fires. All right, moving on to temperate grasslands. These are grasslands most notably known in North America that were grazed by large bison and pronghorn, which we skipped an image over pronghorn, I believe, already. If you want to take a look, it is up here. This is a pronghorn. All right, and so these will graze the grasslands in North America before the grasslands were taken over by farmers. And so most of them now are farm regions, but before they were treeless, grassy regions that were known for having really cold winter temperatures. And so that's shown here. And they also experience a great deal of fire, and can easily overcome that thanks to their roots as well. But for us, these temperate grasslands are North American grasslands that were converted into farm regions. All right, moving right along to your temperate broadleaf forest. They have a unique canopy that's going to be more open, so it's not as competitive as your tropical rainforest. And these trees are, but not as tall or diverse. They do experience a large trees though. They have enough water and precipitation to support large trees. So that's what you see here. These nice broadleaf forests. And so you want to compare this to the next one that mostly has conifers. So the broadleaf has a lot of different types of trees, including trees that are angiosperm and gymnosperm, whereas the next one we'll see is the conifers, which is gymnosperm. So you can think this is kind of all sorts of different trees. These are found in different areas on different continents, but a wide, diverse region of trees and not as competitive as a tropical rainforest. Let's compare that to the coniferous forests. They are going to be characterized by long, cold winters and short, wet summers. And these are here towards the North Pole. These conifer tree forests will have that a cone shape on their trees. The short branches allow for enough light or enough photosynthesis to occur, but without having long branches, as long branches will break when snow is laid upon them. And so that is why you'll find these coniferous forests towards the north, as they are well adapted to handle snow. And so as the cone, as you get towards the base, those branches get longer, so they can get light for photosynthesis, but those bottom branches are more susceptible to breakage by snow. All right, so moving to the tundra here. This is known for having permanently frozen ice, which is called permafrost. That is frozen subsoil, so it's underneath the grassy regions. And it has very little precipitation, almost equivalent to the amount desert regions get. And so the tundra does not look like what you would expect in different seasons. This is a nice warmer season where you can see lots of vegetation growing, but underneath that there is frozen subsoil, which is permafrost. So that would be its unique characteristic. All right, and polar ice. I believe it should be the last one here. As the name states, it is ice and it covers land north of the tundra, much of the Arctic Ocean, and the whole continent of Antarctica. Temperatures obviously are extremely cold and low precipitation year-round. And so here you can see that polar ice is made up of largely ice and rock, snow as well. All right. So that covers the biomes. You want to know each of them as being being terrestrial and their unique qualifier. So if you look down here, some of these might help in understanding them. Tropical forests cluster near the equator, high rainfall, a lot of competition for plants and animals. Savannas are grasslands with scattered trees, well adapted to fires. You think like the environment in Lion King, right? Deserts are defined by their dryness, so they are dry, little precipitation, can be hot or cold. The chaparral will be spiny green shrubs that are well adapted to fires, and these are found off the coast of California, so if that helps you remember, they are going to have low rainfall as well. Temperate grasslands will be the North American prairie that's been converted into farmlands for the most part, grazed by bisons and pronghorns. No trees there. Broadleaf trees will be both gymnosperm and angiosperm trees that are in forest region. Compare that to the coniferous forest, which is just the conifers, which is part of the gymnosperms. That cone-shaped tree. Have cold regions, adapted for snow. Tundra, the long, bitter cold winters, that permafrost, frozen subsoil ice. Polar ice, which is what we would expect when we see tundra probably, but polar ice will have snow ice covering land at very high latitudes. So the North and South Pole. Then we have, last thing there, don't have to worry about it, the global water cycle. That is, I think, still is down here. Take it off, don't need it. And then this here as well. There's enough already, so I will update the review on Canvas now that I've changed it here. And we've gone through chapter 14, hopefully pretty well. I don't expect you to understand everything right away, so please ask questions. Please make comments or make discussions when you have questions. I expect questions. Don't expect you to go through this all on your own. So I will talk to you later. For right now, though, I will go ahead and stop the video, and we'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.